Hey everyone, today I'm actually going to be answering a question that I used to deal with a lot. I deal with a lot less lately, but I used to teach all the time. That was what was a lot of my work. I taught, the youngest student I ever taught was 4, and I taught him for maybe like 5 or 6 months, taught him piano. The oldest person I ever taught was, I don't know, maybe 50s. And that was guitar. I've taught for a long time. I've taught since I was 18, probably. I'm 30 now. I still teach online mostly, but there was a period of time when I had maybe 20 to 25 students, depending on where everybody was at. But the question comes from mt.uplift, who's a friend of mine and Hannah's, whose name is Molly. She asked me to make a video about picking the right instrument/instructor for your child. This can be tough because everybody has a story of they get older and then they say like, man, I really wish I would have stuck with piano, but I just hated my piano teacher. Or, man, I wish I would have learned guitar. Or, man, I wish my mom made me learn something in band, so I played clarinet, but I always liked blank, and so I wish I did that. Okay, I'm going to do one of these at a time. Picking the right instrument for your child can be tough because it's hard to figure out what they're actually going to take to. Let me go ahead and say this. Guitar, stringed instruments in general, have a much higher barrier to entry than things like piano, things like saxophone, things like drums. Bass has a pretty low barrier to entry, but you don't meet a lot of kids that actually want to play bass. But the reason is because it's hard for kids. You have to buy smaller instruments first of all, but it's hard for kids the amount of tension that it takes to press down the strings is harder than you'd think. It takes more coordination than you think. And then with the right hand, or with the picking hand, I guess I should say, that is, even though it's a little bit easier, it's just still, they have to learn 2 separate skills and combine them, which I know you have to do that for other instruments too. But it's just harder to make noise and it immediately sound good. So one thing to remember is guitar is harder up front. I do think that once you reach a certain level with guitar, for most kids who just like want to play songs, it kind of like flattens out, but it's pretty hard up front. So that's one thing to think about for your kids. If your kids are younger, anybody younger than like 8 or 9 maybe, it's hard to teach kids younger than that age guitar. It just is. Some girls who hit their growth spurt like really, really early have like an easier time just because they develop the muscles. But yeah, you just got to know, even for like middle schoolers and high schoolers, who I've taught a lot of, it's hard. It's just hard. The instrument is harder to play at first. So that's something to remember. And then also, another reason I bring that up is because as a parent, it can be frustrating and, watching your child come home and still sound really bad all the time. That's hard and that's frustrating, but you just have to know that it's just the nature of the instrument. You don't, your kid doesn't have a bad teacher. The instrument's just hard. I don't know what to tell you. Okay. As far as piano and drums go, piano and drums are most of the time what I think kids do the best at playing at first. Because like piano, you just go bink and you touch a key and it makes a sound. Drums, you go bop, you hit something and it makes a sound. And kids are like, I love hitting things. So, I think those for that reason, just the fact that you can immediately start making noises that are not super annoying and that don't just sound really bad. I think it's easier for kids to play instruments like that. Something else to remember, and this goes for any instrument. This goes for any woodwind, brass, drums, bass, guitar, piano, like literally whatever. If you're gonna go to a store and buy them an instrument, you have to know that there is no reason to spend a ton of money on an instrument. Now, a ton of money is relatively different depending on the instrument. But so guitar, for example, I always tell them, first of all, don't go buy like a little toy version of what it is. The kids are just going to sound bad on that no matter how good they are, and it's going to be discouraging. So go buy like a decent instrument. I tell most kids or most parents who their kids are learning like acoustic guitar or something, I say go spend like $150. Don't spend more. Unless you just have it and your kid really wants a specific instrument, don't spend more. You don't have to. Don't let somebody upsell you. It doesn't actually make that much of a difference. For guitar, I'm speaking primarily just for guitar, and this applies to bass also. You have a price range in the beginning. For guitar, it's about like $150 to like $300 to $400. That's where that's where the biggest change happens. The guitars that are 100, 150 are worse than the guitars that are for $300, $400. After that, it is not going to benefit a child that much to pay between $450 to like $800. It doesn't benefit a child enough for me to ever confidently say like you should spend that money. So something to think about is that figure out what the actual price range of the instruments are for like the good spots. You know what I mean? Because it matters. You want to buy your child a good enough instrument, but you don't want to spend money you don't have to, because what if they don't like it in a year? But most of the time, your teacher can point you in the right direction if you have an instructor, or I'm sure there's tons of YouTube videos, honestly, about like good beginner guitars for kids. I'm sure there's tons of people demoing guitars that you can just buy offline. And when they're that cheap, they're all going to be factory made. So it's like, don't even worry. You don't have to worry as much. But if you have access to a music store, take your kid and find all of the instruments in the price range. Let them pick out all the ones in the price range that they like. And then literally they have to sit down and try them. They have to sit down and press the strings. They have to sit down and play it. They have to sit down and, press the buttons, like whatever it is. Let them sit down and try it, because they are going to know which one feels the best. And yes, I know what I just said. They're all factory made, so they're all similar, but they're not all equal, right? The kids are going to sit down and they're going to know which instrument, is which one they want to play the most, and that is important. Finding the instrument that the kids want to play. They literally just like, even if it's like, that guitar is red and I want to play a red guitar, even if that's the thing that makes them look at it and want to pick it up and play it, it's important to like lean into that, because it's going to motivate the kid. It's going to motivate them to pick it up more frequently, to invest more time into it, things like that. And that's important. Okay, as far as picking the right instructor, I think that different instructors are good at teaching different types of children. And you can tell the kind of students that the teachers like teaching, because you can ask them ask them questions like, how many students do you have? How many of your students are playing in ensembles? So, for a guitar, that might be like rock bands. For drums, it might be like drumline or band. How many of your students are just playing it for fun? There's a lot of good questions like that you can ask them about their other students. You don't have to get weird and specific, but you can say like, how many of your students are under the age of 10? How many of your students are over the age of 15? Some teachers are only really great. Some teachers, and I've met them, are incredible at starting kids off. They're just so good at it. Like, they're naturally inclined to helping the child understand the fundamentals of the instrument that they're playing from the beginning. But those teachers kind of get to a point sometimes, and they go like, well, from here on out, it's whatever you want, kid. Which I understand that sentiment, but the truth is that if a teacher gets to a point and starts saying that kind of thing, then I think the teacher might just not totally know what to do with that kid. And then you got to think like, okay, do I like this teacher enough to let my kid to stay with them long enough to like figure out what's next? Some teachers awful at teaching beginners. They just are. They just don't understand why. It's not that they don't understand. They just have less patience for kids not getting it faster. Maybe they have less like different ideas to help the kid. Like some teachers, they have one way of teaching beginners, and if that one way doesn't work, then like, sorry. And that's okay. Like, the teachers don't have to be incredible at teaching your 8-year-old. That's fine. But those same teachers, when they get to a point where they're competent on the instrument and they're 16 and, they want to learn how to play Zeppelin, or they want to learn how to sing like, whoever, or, whatever. Like, they want to learn how to make beats because they like that kind of music. Like, that's when those teachers are great for your kids, because then they know, like, oh, okay, he already knows his ABCs. Let me teach this kid how to talk. Let me teach him how to talk for real. And so it's valuable to ask, potential teachers, if they only have kids from the age of like 15 to 25, well, there you go. Then your 8-year-old probably doesn't need to take lessons from them unless you know them and you really like them. But yeah, it's okay to ask teachers questions like that. Also, when teachers don't teach your specific child's age range, skill level, something like that, it doesn't mean they're a bad teacher. It just means they're better at teaching other things, so they attract those kinds of students. So don't immediately start telling your parent friends, like, don't take them to so-and-so. They're obviously a bad teacher because they only have a bunch of 18-year-old students. Personally, I also think that as a parent, you probably know what kind of learner your child is. And I'm going to run through like 3 types of students that I typically saw, and what I would prescribe for each one of those students. Because if you don't know, then that's okay. It's just that you may be able to kind of figure it out. And that will help your child succeed faster than just, not knowing what to do. Okay, so the first type of student that I saw frequently was kids that they like the physicality of playing an instrument. And these kids, you know who they are because they'll practice more, first of all. And they normally like music enough, but there's something about like the physical aspect. It's like a sport or something. There's something about the physical aspect of playing the instrument that brings that child joy. And so they're willing to do it for just a long time. And they want to play faster and cleaner and whatever. For those students, I often found that books like to work through were great, because a lot of times those kids they're either goal oriented or they like playing like games, right? Since the kid can read a page down, learn what's on the page really well, and then be able to turn, and then it's like, I've got more. They can just digest as much as they possibly can. And also when they go home, they have something like an assignment to do, which I know helps some kids out when you have specific kind of goals and things like that in mind. And so a lot of times teachers, people, in my opinion, a great way to teach those kids is like, you just keep giving them as much as they can handle. I don't, if I give a kid an assignment and he like crushes it, he or she crushes it, or they crushes it, and the next time I don't give them the assignment the same size. I give them a little bit more, because I want to know where the threshold is for the child, where they like really start benefiting from the amount of music that you're giving them. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be like amazing or like savants or something like that. But most of the time those kids are not bad. I'm going to go ahead and say that. Most of the time, those kids they just don't end up being bad at playing the instrument, because it's the physical aspect that like gets them motivated. So for those kids, most of the time you want to find them teachers that are a little more serious and a little more kind of like classically oriented. I don't mean classical music, I just mean like a little more old school in the way that they teach, a little more like hard-nosed. Those kids will benefit really well from that kind of teaching style. Another type of student I saw was children that were only there because their parents wanted them to be there. That was very common. And here's how I knew. it wasn't that when they got into the room and sat down with me, it wasn't that they were less motivated in the room, that they, wanted to succeed less, or that they didn't care when they were messing up or something like that. It was when they left the room that there were problems. A lot of kids like that, their parents will tell me, like, man, it is a chore getting them here. They hate, those kids hate the act of driving to the lesson. They hate everything up to the doorway. They can't stand. But then because they're not interested, they just don't want to do it. Which is fine. I don't take that personally as a teacher, and I don't think any teacher should take that personally. But then as soon as the kid gets in the door, completely different story. Those kids, if your teacher's a good teacher, they will have ways to motivate them in the room. They will have ways that they can grab that kid. They'll be like, hey, have you heard this song? Let me show you this. I can show you, we can play this. What about this? What if that this? Those kids will love what they do in the room. If they don't like what they're doing in the room all the time, maybe a bad teacher. But most of the time, 60-70% of the time in the room, they will like it just fine. But it's when they leave, it will be really hard to get them to practice. It'll be really hard to just keep them motivated outside. Even if you're a parent who's really good about getting your kids to like read every day and do their homework and at this time, and even if you have a regimented schedule, if they just don't like doing music, they're not interested in music. And yeah, maybe they get down the road and they say like, man, I wish I would have, whatever. But it's fine. Music is not a young man's thing. Music is an every man's thing. So there are so many people that get to music later in life, and that's perfectly fine. A lot of times what I will do with those kinds of students is I will, if they come in, I've done this so many times. If they come in on guitar and they're that kind of student that they're only there because their mom makes them, most of the time what I'll do is I'll say like, okay, here's a couple chords, play those chords, and then I sit down on piano and play the same thing with them. And they go like, whoa, you can play piano? Maybe I could play piano too. Or I'll sit down on drums, and they'll be like, oh, you're playing drums? I love hitting stuff too. Like, maybe we're friends now. Or like whatever, or like maybe I want to do that. And so what I'll end up doing is I will teach them the same fundamentals in music, because the fundamentals of music are the same across every instrument. It's the same 12 notes, it's the same like rhythmic patterns. At least in America, you're being taught the same information all the time. Same scales, it doesn't change, it's the same. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll teach them the exact same information on guitar, piano, and drums, or guitar, bass, and drums, or we'll learn a song. We'll learn one song if they're already okay at the instrument. We'll learn it on guitar, bass, and singing. We'll learn to sing all the words. They can listen to me like hack out something. And really what I'm trying to do is those kinds of kids, because they may only last like 2 months, they may last 4 months, they may last 6 months, who knows. But a lot of times what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give that child a foundation of music. So hopefully they come out learning to read music. Hopefully they come out learning to understand music, to count music, things like just basic things. They'll know like what the notes are on a piano. So that later in life when they come to a place where they go like, oh, I love saxophone, I love tuba, something like that. I love Dr. Seuss instruments. I love, whatever. It's not a slam at tuba players. I'm making a joke. Chill. But maybe they get to a place where they're finally interested enough to want to learn how to do something, and then they can reach back in their brain and go like, oh yeah, whole notes and half notes, or oh yeah, it just goes A to G sharp. Oh, that's right. I remembered that from my music teacher. I'll never know what his name is anymore. Whatever. That's the goal. Is that you invest in them, you plant a seed, and it's a long-term investment. May not be the most short-term investment, and it may be grueling the entire time. As a teacher, I can't, teaching a student who is not only uninspired but just doesn't really want to be there. It's hard. It's hard as a teacher teaching those kids. And it's hard for the kids too. It's hard for the parents. It's hard for everybody. But most of the time what happens is those kids, they learn things for here. Maybe they don't walk out being good players. And that's hard for parents to understand. But maybe they learn a lot here, and then they go like, oh, basketball's starting up. I gotta do that. And I go like, yeah, that's cool. Have a good time. As a parent, you gotta understand if your child comes out not knowing how to play, It's not always the teacher's fault. I mean, it is a little bit if they can't play at all, but it's not always the teacher's fault. Sometimes it's just the kid's motivation, or, despite what they're telling you at home and things like that, that they love it, or that they still like it, or whatever. And most of the time, personally, when those kids get to the end and I can tell, like, all right, this isn't going to go anywhere else. I had a student for about 8. It was either like 8 months or a year or something like that. But we hit kind of a milestone because we got to a certain level, and then we like passed a certain like semester or something like that. And I asked the kid one day in class, because he came in, didn't know anything that I had asked him to check out or practice or whatever. And I was like, hey, do you like being here? And the kid was like, no. I was like, cool. Well, I'm gonna talk to your mom or dad about just stopping this. And the kid was like, okay. And then we just hung out for the rest of the lesson, and we worked on music, we listened to stuff, like whatever. But so anyway, all that to say, for those kids, there's still a way to teach them, and I think trying music lessons out is great. But that's how I go about teaching them. I teach them fundamentals. For the third type of student that I saw a lot when I was teaching a lot, was kids who come in, maybe are not the best at music, but love music. These kids will come in and they will talk my ear off. In a 30-minute lesson, they will want to talk for 10 or 15 minutes about some song, some singer, some instrument, some YouTube video they saw where this kid was doing this weird thing and they liked it, or like whatever. Those kids can talk, and they always want to talk about music. They love music, but maybe they have a harder time, playing instruments is just hard. It just is. Every instrument is hard to some degree. So it doesn't matter how much the kid likes music. If the instrument is keeping them from getting to a place where they can make noise that sounds good or sounds like the songs that they know, those kids a lot of times will like fizzle out, which is a bummer because they like music a lot. But a lot of times what I will do is I will teach those kids. I'll start off kind of the same way. So I'll instead of one instrument, I'll teach them music fundamentals across multiple instruments. Maybe I give them homework and like worksheets, junk like that, and I teach their parents a little bit too, so the parents and the kids can talk about music together, which is a lot of fun for parents and kids. And a lot of times what I'll do is I will give them a lot less homework, but it'll be very specific. So I'll say, okay, go learn these 2 measures of this song. Go home and learn this one chord. Pick up the guitar or go to the piano, sit down and play this one chord, this one note 5 times for the day at different times during the day, and then call it a day. So the homework will look like a lot less, and that's hard for a parent also, because it's hard to listen to your kid pick up a guitar and go like blomp blomp, and then just set it down and then walk away. They'll be like, what are you doing? You're not practicing. I'll be like, well, Mr. Josh told me, whatever. But really what I'm trying to do is I want them to succeed in music immediately, right? So I want them to be able to come in and be like, look, I got the 2 measures, and they'll play it. They'll go like bing, 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 and then that's it. And it goes by in the blink of an eye. But they feel the success. That success will propel them to be more motivated, which will then propel them to practice more, which will then get them to be more successful in music. And also what I will do with those kids is I will immediately jump to the music that they like. Kids who like Minecraft, I'll teach them Minecraft music all day. Kids that like High School Musical, that's not cool anymore. Kids that like Frozen 2, I'll teach them Frozen 2 all day, every day of the week, whatever. But a lot of times that's the goal at first, is to get them succeeding very quickly. Because what they need to see is that music is possible for them, and that the music that they like is possible for them. I think one thing that I hate is when a kid really likes music and they go in and a teacher is immediately like, great, that's awesome that you really like music. Now here's a bunch of random etudes that some classical composer wrote forever ago. Learn all these, and the kids they start off and they're like, okay, cool, and they start off and maybe they sound bad, or they can't learn as quickly as maybe they were expecting to, and then they come in and the teacher is still like, nope, you got to get through all these etudes first, and then they get motivated and they're like, okay, this is harder than I thought, maybe I don't like music as much as I thought I did, which is sad. and things like that. But the deal is to give them that sense of success early on, which you can do without lying to them. Anybody who's watching this and thinks like, well, are you saying that I have to, or that my teacher has to tell my child he's good when he's not? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you give your students, and hopefully the teachers give your child an assignment that they can do, not an assignment that they can work up to doing, in 3 months. They need assignments that they can do and succeed at now. It's really important. So yeah, those are 3 types of students, and each of those kinds of students, they do well with different kinds of teachers. Something to consider also is group classes. Anytime I have like a music lover student, or like the first kind, the kids who just like to play, if they're maybe they're extroverted, maybe they are, maybe they're like a music lover, but they're not great. Putting them in a situation where people are succeeding in music around them, will propel them to succeed. It just will. Also, this is how I was. If you're competitive, which I'm competitive, putting your child in a music class situation, where they see people succeeding around them will drive them. They'll be like, well, now I need to see. I'm not saying it's about competition. Music is not about competition, but there's no denying the fact that that group settings really benefit some types of children more than others. Also, if your kid plays like guitar or like a rock band instrument, there's tons of rock band schools, School of Rock, this, or something like that they offer like group classes as well as private instruction, which is most of the time what I would suggest is you want to get your kid in a private instruction situation where the kid can learn the instrument like that, but then immediately be able to apply it in the group setting. That's how I was. Growing up, I was the first type of student, right? So I loved the physical aspect of playing an instrument. That like kind of drove me, people said a lot of things like, whoa, you're so talented or whatever. But it was just the physical aspect of music drove me to keep succeeding. But after a while, it got boring. You know what I mean? Maybe partially that was because bass doesn't have like high heights for kids when they're young. But then because I was able to jump into like a community jazz band, I started playing gigs when I was like 15 or 16, like coffee shops and like random stuff, gigs that high schoolers get. I had avenues where I could be in a situation with other people who are succeeding around me. And that drove me to constantly get better. And a lot of times what I would do is I would have a private instructor for like 2 years. And then I would just have gigs. I would have like a jazz band or whatever. Jazz was the first kind of music that I learned. So I would have like gigs, and then I would have like jazz band. My high school didn't have a jazz band, but there was like a community jazz band that I was a part of. And that would propel me for like the next year and a half. And then I would get to a situation where I would go like, oh, I really want to succeed. My competitive drive would kick in, and I would go like, I want to get better. So then I would go not back to a teacher, but I would find a new teacher who is better suited for me then, which was great for me. And that's how I did really well from ages like 16, from like 15. Maybe I started playing when I was like 14 or 15, maybe even younger. I don't remember. But then I started taking it really seriously at like my junior year of high school. So I was like 16 or 17. Another thing to know is there's a lot of things that have to line up for your child to do well in music. You have to find, the right instructor for the right time in their music development. Is that child in a group? Is that kid in a band? Is that kid in like band in high school? Does that kid have friends that play music also? All of these things, does that kid hear music around the house? If they don't hear a lot of music around the house, they're probably not going to be very into music, which is how it is. And now I get so many students that want to get into producing, which is awesome. And the kids want to make beats, and they want to like write their own rhymes and stuff like that. I used to teach a kid who was, I started off as I was teaching him guitar or piano, I don't remember. But he loved music, and he loved rap music. He loved like radio music. And eventually it got to a place where right before he stopped taking from me, I was like, hey, man, you should check out making beats. You know, there are free programs that you can download. There are you know, awesome YouTube videos to watch. You can learn to make beats and write songs. The kid wanted to write songs. That was the deal. The kid wanted to write songs. Unfortunately, he had a mother who she would say things frequently, which was very sad. She would say things frequently to me like, I don't want him to embarrass himself by writing a bad song. I'd rather him just play a song that's already written. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is a gross thing to hear. It was tough because, and maybe you feel that way as a parent, but you have to know that your child is either going to sound bad writing their own music, or they're going to sound bad playing somebody else's music. There's no kid that just picks up an instrument and sounds great. So that was an interesting situation. And you know, I found a way to teach him for a while, but it just got to a place where, you know, it was hard to teach him, based on his home situation and things like that. I didn't like let him go for that, you know, for that reason. I don't think I did at all. I think he had sports or something like that come up. But yeah, finding the right musical situation can be hard for your child. But there is a right situation. I don't want you to think that there's not. You know, have your kid try out multiple instruments. Try an instructor for a while. I would say, like, don't do like 2 practice lessons. I've done that, or like tryout lessons. I've done that before, where a parent will say like, well, we'll do 2 lessons and like see if it works between you and him. And I was like, well, you know, who knows if it will? Either the kid likes me or he doesn't in 2 lessons. Like, who knows? But as far as like, you know, finding the right teacher for your child to succeed, pick a teacher, hang around for a while, pick a teacher that's in the budget, that's in like, you know, an area that you like to be in already. You know, you don't have to go like way out of your way. I think it's hard to teach kids online, personally, because it's like some kids, if they have to have an adult there, or like, you know, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's like, I just like to be able to point on the page and say like, it's right here, you know, like play this, play it right here. I like to be able to like move their little finger and like move it over and be like, it's like that, not this. That's me. Maybe, I'm sure there are some teachers who are really good at teaching kids online, but I think that's an option to explore. But, you know, your child has to be like down. You know, they can't, you know, I can't tell a child to not jump around its own room forever, you know, without being there, you know what I mean? So, you know, there's a lot of different ways. It can be really hard to find the right way, but there is a right way. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments, and I'd love to point you in the right direction. If you're in an area and you don't know any teachers or anything at all, who knows? Maybe I know somebody there. Ask me. Search things like, you know, hashtag on Instagram, hashtag music lessons, or hashtag musician, hashtag whatever city you live in. You'll find something probably. But yeah, there's tons of great teachers who would love to help your child appreciate music and love music. So just keep looking around, and like I said, ask me any questions, and I'd love to help out. If you like this content, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Check out my other videos. If you want me to do a video about something specific, put it down in the comments. I'd love to. Or follow me on Instagram. Ask me there. It's at Jhow275. I want to make content that directly benefits people. So just let me know what that is, and I'll make it happen.